Yo guys, and welcome to another Spore creation video. For today's creation, we're going to be updating the Thanos model from Avengers Endgame. First things first guys, no spoilers, alright? I made this creation about a day or two before Endgame was actually released, before it was available in cinemas, so I made this before that. Therefore, anything in this creation I simply got from Google Images. I don't know, or at the time of making this, I didn't know what is or what is not in it, so again, don't worry about spoilers. Happy to say that this is perfectly fine. So, Thanos himself, the big bad guy. I made him a second time. I went ahead and remade him because first of all, my previous one was... it was kind of odd. It was a bit of a weird creation. Then again, as many of you will know, humanoids are really hard to make in Spore. Granted, Thanos is not a human, he is a Titan. The point being, he's got very human-like features, and they themselves are very hard to Spore. So it did mean that my previous creation was kinda creepy, kinda weird. Animations were just Spore animations, you know, that whole thing. So again, I wanted to remake him. This creation took a while. I'm not sure how long it took in the end. I did the majority of it during a live stream. I struggled vehemently because again, humanoids are a massive pain in the butt. I think I spent about 2.5 hours making him during a live stream. Absolutely struggling, mainly with the armor and the colors. And then I just pretty much basically stripped him naked and redid his entire armor about 4 or 5 times. And I think in the end, this creation probably took about 5 hours in total, which is kind of excessive. But when it comes to the end result, I can justify it. I really can justify it. So the biggest issue that I always have when it comes to humanoids is 2 major things. First of all is their proportions and anatomy. Again, it's those little classic things that are quite hard to translate to Spore because things are like very round or you can't get like a certain shape, particularly hips and torso. They are the 2 biggest issues to do in Spore. And of course the faces. I think we've all seen what humans are like in Spore and how bad their faces can be, so again, you guys, you'll see that in the video itself. It's fine, it's fine. I started off with the base humanoids, a little bit on the thick side, but otherwise significantly thinner than what Thanos actually is. Reason being is that I'll then use the actual armor parts, the nail downs or the armor, whatever, the clothing and body plating. I'll use all of that to actually define the proportions later on. Hands are gargantuan. I ended up fixing that later. As far as trying to make the armor goes, I went through a whole array of different techniques. Starting with the nail down, they had the most broad, sharp colour, very nice solid colours, which is what I initially wanted. And then I tried to use a couple of the Pandora's toolbox and drone parts here and there to try and get like different varying shapes, basically like cylinders and such. And as much as I did like them, I very quickly found that while they had the right shapes, their textures just weren't quite right. It's a bit of a weird thing with a lot of the modded parts in Spore. They're very inconsistent in terms of colours and textures. Whereas one part from the same mod may properly and accurately inherit the colour or the textural detail base of the creation. Some other parts just will, you know, make the colour really muddy or really toned down, really watered down or whatever. Either way, the colours are not consistent. And that's a big issue if I'm using a texture, like the same texture for 2 different purposes. It's a very tricky thing to describe really, but trust me when I say it just wasn't really working out. As much as the techniques did work in terms of shape and form, they just were not working in colours, and that is like a really big issue when it comes to these modded creations. And especially for something like Thanos, a humanoid, I need the colours to be consistent. I need them to be specific and work the way they need, otherwise it's just going to look cartoonish and very uncanny. And then, inevitably, creepy. And that's not what we want here. So moving on further from the boots and the legs then, so as you can see, again, the overall shape is quite decent. Started working on the shoulder, the chest armor, all that kind of stuff. And like I said, you know, I did go back and forth quite a bit with the armor. In fact, I think this entire video might just be making armor looking back onto it now. And I do, like, as much as I like all the different styles I went for, like, for example, right now, the nail downs, I really, really like just how the shoulders and the chest plates looks. I really like how it all came together. It's just, once again, the textures. Fortunately, I think in the end, the only part that really did come out rather successful in terms of the different parts and such was the face. That is something I never thought I would say, that the face was more successful than the armor. But when it came to the Thanos creation, I, again, really tried much harder when it came to the face, because in general, they are just really, really nightmarish to do. There's so many little precise features when it comes to the face that when you try to recreate them, such as lips, especially making a male character, if you make a masculine character and you want to define their mouth, you gotta add lips, but then you come to a point where the lips look too full, too large, it looks very feminine. And it just comes off, like, again, it comes off looking very uncanny and very weird. There's also all these other little complications here and there, such as, you know, the angle of the eyebrows, the proportions between the cheekbones, the nose, the eyes, how close the eyes are together, how high or low they are. There's all these very, very specific, precise, and yet easy to miss factors when it comes to making faces. And again, this extends, like, by far out of creations. It really goes towards everything. Because human faces are the things that we recognise the most in general, it is going to be the thing that has to be the most perfect to recreate. If you have one little feature that just looks slightly off, it'll ruin the entire face and it'll simply come across looking creepy. Heaven forbid you're using core Spore parts, you know, non-modded. In that case, the eyes are really bulbous, the noses are horrifying, the mouths are even more horrifying. It's quite funny, so that puts a lot of pressure on me to not only make the creation look not creepy, but to actually make it look alright, and that is a very hard distinction to do. But when it comes to the face, you know, if you're gonna make like such an important iconic character like Thanos, I think this would go for a lot of characters, to be honest. If you're gonna make like any important critical character of any movie or game, whatever, you kinda wanna have the face be respectable, to have it just look like him. It's like, it's trying to put in that little bit of extra effort, I guess. And I think the face alone probably took me about an hour. I'm not sure, with a lot of tweaking here and there, back and forth. Another thing is the fact that Thanos is bald, which basically means that making creatures, or making our humanoids that are bald, in my opinion, are harder than the ones that have hair. Because with hair, you can just fix a lot of the mistakes. You can cover up, like, if the skull looks a little bit weird, like the cranium, if it looks a little bit weird, or the ears are in a slightly wrong position, or the forehead's a bit too large, whatever. You can cover a lot of that up with hair. When it's a bald character, on the other hand, you're really kind of scuppered. You gotta try as hard as you can. Now, the animations in this Thanos are not that much better, but his neck is no longer snapping everywhere. In fact, the fact that his neck is no longer snapping is the reason why his animations are so weird, which you will see shortly. Thanks to the use of invisible limbs and invisible frames and such, I was able to hide a couple of invisible things, like whatever, just like into the neck or the head area. That way the head was still functional, it still moved around and such. It just didn't, you know, turn into a giraffe, basically. But as a result, because of these new areas, like, the way Spore works is it will kind of like reshift the entire animation depending on the posture, the width, the angle, the joints, everything through the legs. It's all very procedurally done. Therefore, when you just randomly add an additional set of legs onto the face, even though they're invisible, they still function. It messes with the procedural generation of the rest of the animation, and therefore it kind of goes a bit funky. So I tried my best here, and his walk is very strange. But as far as Spore goes, it's a lot better. Trust me, it's a lot better than it could be. So here is the final Thanos at last. Now, when it came to the armor in the end, like I said, I did most of the creation during a live stream. I did the final armor, just completely remade it from scratch off camera, because the video itself is already long enough, as we can tell here. Imagine like this video being twice as long. So yes, I wasn't able to get all the armor in the end because there was a lot of back and forth, trial and error, lots and lots of tweaking, but in the end, I love it. It is so much better than what it was before. There's the awkward walk I was just talking about, which again, as far as Spore goes, it's not that terrible. It's a bit bad, but it's really not that terrible. But the armor, I love it. I really, really love how it came out. I was able to get this using the Dark Injections armor parts, the parts that actually come from Dark Spore itself, RIP, you know, rest in peace. That got Thanos snapped as well. And those armor pieces, I kind of forget that they actually do a really good job. They're very niche because of the way that they texture out, and they're very, very limiting. But when they work really well, as is seen here. Managed to get a lovely golden armor, nice and shiny, without it being too flat, without it being too bold or too bright. It's just a nice, consistent armor color scheme. It works all together. The black as well isn't terribly dark. It just looks like dark armor. and overall, I gotta say, I'm really proud of this. While again, the animations may be kind of funky, as far as a spore creation goes, as far as a humanoid spore creation goes, I am really proud of this. And guys, I hope you like it as well. Thank you very much for watching, thank you for listening to my rambling, I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, and as always, I will see you all next time. Cheers.